Prolonged school closures result in millions of students going missing from the school system. Dr. Seuss is being canceled by the left, and Bill Burr defends Gina Carano, and I have a lot to say about that. Our lead story today is dealing with the prolonged school closures and how it has resulted in millions of students going missing from the school systems. When COVID hit, I was teaching 6th grade mathematics in Los Angeles, California. Within Los Angeles, California, you definitely have underprivileged schools and you definitely have underprivileged children. Even if you're not at an underprivileged school or a high needs school, you're still going to have underprivileged children within that school that need to be taken care of. When I was teaching mathematics about a year ago at this middle school, COVID hit. And when COVID hit, students went from obviously being in the classroom to distance learning, or what you also know it as virtual learning. Now, the children that are underprivileged, it just so happens to be that their parents are also really hard to get a hold of. At least that's something that I've seen. And again, it's nothing against the parents. It's nothing against the child. Maybe that parents work in multiple jobs. Maybe they just don't have access to a phone, things like that. There's many reasons as to why you can't get a hold of them. So I'm not attacking any parties by any means. But what I can say is even pre-COVID, it was hard to get a hold of some children's parents and track the children down, let alone now within a COVID environment, going to distance or virtual learning, it's even that much more harder to track down these children. Now, when COVID hit, the first 2 weeks, there definitely was a handful of students that were extremely hard to get a hold of. And even during that first semester, it was even that much more harder to get a hold of just a normal student, let alone an underprivileged student that might be struggling with Wi-Fi, internet connection, access to a laptop or technology. It was very difficult, again, to get a hold of some of my students. Now, it's not surprising that some students would slip through the cracks regarding this distance or virtual learning, but it is a little surprising at the amount or magnitude of the students that have gone missing or slipped through the cracks, or the school system is not just able to get a hold of them. Now, something I want to be clear on is that we don't want to put the blame all towards the school system. The reason why I say that is I've seen the work behind the scenes that the school system does to just try to get a hold of the parents or the student or anybody within that family, or reaching out to like kind of the next of kin or whoever is in line or succession on the emergency card just to get a hold of the student. Sometimes the principal will show up to the house and knock on the door. After weeks of trying to get a hold of them, they won't open up. I mean, there's so many different reasons as to why this stuff is happening, but I don't want to put all the blame on the public school system or the education system by any means. The blame also needs to be put on the parent and the student because it's their responsibility to make sure their kid is attending their education. Our first article is coming from Blaze Media. It's written by the one and only Phil Shiver. Once again, Phil, I love your work. Keep doing what you're doing. He titled it, "Prolonged School Closures Have Reportedly Resulted in Millions of Students Going Missing from the School System." Again, I can't believe it's millions. I was expecting thousands. Again, there's many underprivileged schools, and it is hard to get a hold of some of these people's or students' parents or guardians. So I really feel for the school system here. Again, it is, I'm sure, partially their fault, but again, there's always two sides. There's the parent or guardian that has the responsibility of making sure their child, son or daughter, is getting an education and making sure that they're showing up to school, even if it is virtual learning. And even that causes problems because not everybody has access to Wi-Fi, the technology, even though sometimes the school will supply the technology. But there's many factors into why this situation is happening. Phil starts off by saying an eye-popping number of students have reportedly gone missing from the public school systems around the country amid prolonged school closures due to the coronavirus pandemic. The news, which serves as yet another sad reminder of the unintended injury caused by lengthy and exorbitant shutdown policies, is poised to add fuel to the fiery debate over reopening schools happening now in countless American communities. A notable number of students seem to have simply fallen off the grid, not showing up for online or in-person instruction, their whereabouts unknown by school officials. The report stated, adding that the dilemma has left experts and educators scrambling to find the students and come up with policies to buck the dangerous trend. The report made mention of a recent study put forward by Beth Weather Education Partners, a nonprofit focused on underserved communities, which estimates that as many as 3 million of America's most educationally marginalized students in the country have functionally disappeared since last March, which was about a year ago, and that's what I was mentioning previously. when the pandemic first forced schools to close. The group claims to have arrived at its estimate by making projections based upon the percentage of at-risk groups not in school based on media reports and available data. As an educator, this is extremely tough to read. It's extremely tough to hear. And I'm sure even as someone that is not an educator, it is already tough to hear and take in and to see the result of what the coronavirus or COVID has done to our school system. As many of you already know, children are not learning as well virtually as they were when they were in person. And that's not just me saying it. I mean, parents and guardians see it. Everybody sees the results of how COVID has affected these children. But even my students have said that virtual learning compares nothing to in-person learning. Coronavirus has left a massive void within the education system in terms of missing gaps of knowledge regarding content, but has also left its mark on the student with psychological problems, depression, anxiety, things of that nature. And we're going to see these problems for the next 10 plus years. I know there's many teachers that are putting in exhaustive hours to try and service all our students and all our children because we care for them and we want to help them. And I feel like this article, a little bit's leaving that out, is on the side of the teacher and the school system. We kind of only see the bad image that goes on within the school system, but we don't really get to hear enough about those teachers that really put in the effort to care for these children and really sacrifice a lot of their time outside of the classroom to make sure all of these children are served appropriately and rightfully. Phil goes on to say, in its report, ABC News gave credence to the estimate, though it stopped short of explicitly confirming it. Nevertheless, after contacting officials from school systems in all 50 states, the outlet determined that many states who tracked such information confirmed they have seen a significant decline in their enrollment numbers, while many other states reported they have thousands of missing students. Here are a few examples cited in the report. In Michigan, K-12 enrollment decreased this fall by some 53,000 students out of 1.5 million students. In Dallas, Texas, which was home to approximately 153,000 students last year, there are about 9,000 high schoolers, 2,000 middle schoolers, and 1,000 elementary school students underaccounted for. The article goes on to say the report noted that students can go missing for a variety of reasons, and that's something that I talked about. It is true, there are a variety of reasons that students go missing. It was something that even happened pre-COVID, and now it's just been exacerbated because of COVID. Students from low-income families in particular may not have the access to technology needed to participate in distance learning. It could also be that the economic downturn that resulted from the pandemic caused poor students to be more at risk of missing school. That is absolutely true. In any case, the tragic revelations confirm some of the fears many critics of school closures have expressed for the better part of a year, namely that with schools closed indefinitely, students would be inevitably left behind. And that is exactly true. At the end of this article, Phil left us off with a hard truth that the results of the pandemic, the results of school closure, has resulted in students that will be left behind. I know that's something we don't want to hear, but let me give you a little bit of perspective on what happens in a normal year and what's going to be the ramifications going forward. In a normal year, a teacher will have about 180 students throughout the day, throughout the year. 180 students will have on minimum 180 missing gaps of knowledge. And what I mean by that is a missing gap of knowledge is something that a student is lacking in from their prior years of education, and they're not able to make connections to the current content because they're missing that missing gap of knowledge that they should have attained in prior subjects within mathematics or prior years of their education. Now that you have 180 students that have 180 different missing gaps of knowledge, that is the bare minimum that you're going to have because each student has their own missing gaps of knowledge, and that could be 10 plus per student. So on the bare minimum, you have 180 missing gaps of knowledge, and all those missing gaps of knowledge are different. And somehow, as an educator, you have to fill in that missing gaps of knowledge that they weren't able to acquire in the previous years. And again, this is on a normal school year pre-COVID. Well, you take those 180 missing gaps of knowledge and you extrapolate it by at least 10 because they're not just going to have one missing gap of knowledge, especially within mathematics, but they're going to have a ton of missing gaps of knowledge. Now this has been exponentially extrapolated because we have to be honest, students didn't really learn that much when COVID first hit in that spring semester. What I can say is that us educators are going to try our best to fill those missing gaps of knowledge, but you have to be understanding on the viewpoint of the educator that it's almost impossible to already fill the missing gaps of knowledge that were present pre-COVID, let alone now fix those missing gaps of knowledge that are going to be prevalent after COVID. Please bear with your teacher and your educator, not just the math teachers, but also all subjects, because I can say again, teachers are working tirelessly to help every student and serve every student in the best way possible. Our next news story of the day is the left is now trying to cancel Dr. Seuss. Before it was Gina Carano, then it was the Muppets with Kermit and Miss Piggy, and now it is Dr. Seuss. This article is by our friends over at the Daily Wire. It is written by Joseph Curl, and he titles it 6 Dr. Seuss Books Yanked Over Racist and Insensitive Imagery. Curl starts off by saying, the company that publishes Dr. Seuss books will stop selling 6 titles citing racist and insensitive imagery. These books portray people in ways that are hurtful and wrong. Dr. Seuss Enterprises told the Associated Press in a statement, seizing sales of these books is only part of our commitment and our broader plan to ensure Dr. Seuss Enterprises catalog represents and supports all communities and families. The company told the outlet in a statement Tuesday, which just happens to be the birthday of Dr. Seuss, whose real name was Theodore Seuss Geisel. Curl goes on to say, while millions of American children have been raised with the books, which include positive messages about tolerance and protecting the environment, some have drawn criticism over the way blacks, Asians, and others are drawn. The author has also been ripped for his earlier advertising and propaganda illustrations. I want to start off with saying this. Racism is evil and it's wrong and it's disgusting. But the conversation isn't about racism being evil and disgusting. The vast majority of Americans agree with that statement. The conversation and the argument is about if we should remove things off the shelves or off media or off social media, out of movies that we find intolerable or racist or homophobic, things like that, if we should remove that from the consumer or restricting access to consumer to those products that we find, again, offensive or intolerable. Now, the conservative answer is that we should leave those things on the shelf because we can look at those things, those ideas that we find evil and wrong from the past and make sure that we don't repeat it again in the future by learning from it. We have all read something that we disagree with or we find problematic or that we find offensive or disgusting or evil, but we read those things and learn from it so that we aren't causing it or attributing to it. Now, I know, for example, in the school system, when I believe I was in middle school or high school, I read Huckleberry Finn. I think it even used the N-word back then, but it was an opportunity for my teacher to sit down with us and explain to us the impact of the word and why it's such a derogatory, racist word and why we should never use it. Now, rather than getting rid of Huckleberry Finn and suppressing it or getting rid of the word, which I think they did later on in later versions, and even now some school districts like Burbank Unified School District is getting rid of those types of books or has already gotten rid of those books, it was a learning moment for all of us to see why it was wrong, and again, so that we don't repeat it again in the future. And it should be the same for Dr. Seuss. We shouldn't be removing the books from the bookshelves. We should use it as a learning opportunity for our children. And again, so that we can correct the mistakes that we made in the past and make sure that they don't happen again. But the other issue with all of this is it's only the right that is standing up for this kind of stuff. It's the left that is constantly trying to want to cancel, remove, deplatform, censor, doing all sorts of things, not just the speech, but now to written material, movies, and they're constantly just trying to rewrite history and remove things from the history books so that we cannot learn from, again, our mistakes and the problems that happened in the past so that, again, I know I'm repeating myself, but so that we don't have that same stuff happen in the future. Speaking of the left trying to remove and cancel everything, Bill Burr is standing up for Gina Carano, and we all love a little bit of Bill Burr, don't we? So our next article is coming from Louder with Crowder. If you haven't already, please go subscribe over at the Mug Club. But this is titled, The Mandalorian's Bill Burr Defends Gina Carano, Unloads on Cancel Culture. It starts off by saying, you haven't heard a lot of Gina Carano's now former The Mandalorian co-stars speaking out in her defense. Probably because they're all scared of losing their jobs or being deleted or canceled by Lucasfilm, Twitter, their agents, their management, their sponsors, all of that. Scratch that. You haven't heard any of them speak out. Bill Burr is the first and addressed the issue on his podcast with Bert Kreischer. Fellow comedian Joe DeRosa was a guest and was the one who brought up the Carano firing. Burr called her an absolute sweetheart before lighting into the culture that canceled her, which makes sense. Now that the left has a scalp, Burr can easily be next. That is absolutely right, but Burr has such a big following, and his following is kind of the fan base that doesn't care and kind of loves when he says things that are offensive. I know I do. I'm a huge Bill Burr fan. I find him hilarious. It says here, Gina's a super nice bleeping person, and somehow someone will take this video and they'll bleeping make me say something else. It's bleeping crazy time. There's people just waiting, just laying in the weeds. And he's absolutely right. There's people out there just waiting and watching for you to say something wrong, and then they're going to take that and put it all over social media and try to get you canceled or removed. How about just be an individual and you continue to buy tickets to people who you want to go see? Exactly right. If you don't like somebody, if you find them offensive, don't go watch them. Tell other people not to go watch them, but don't go out there and try to get them removed, deplatformed, all those other things. Just don't go watch their content. It says here, I'll be honest, I love Bill Burr and think he's brilliant. It would have been nice to hear him speak out more publicly than just as a response on his podcast. I gotta say, Bill Burr, he's a man of the people, for the people. The man is a national treasure, and he said it perfectly in this article, and he only did it in a few seconds, and he got his point across. He said it perfectly, and I emphasized this already, but he said there's people just waiting, just laying in the weeds. They're waiting for you to make a mistake or dig up something from your past and making you pay the price for it. Rather than forgiving you, rather than just leaving it alone, leaving it in the past, again, they have to dig it up and make sure that they beat you down with the hammer of social justice, to make sure that you're deleted, uncensored, or removed from all public life. And in one sentence, Burr gives a solution to all this. He says, how about just be an individual and you continue to buy tickets to people who you want to go see? Meaning, if you don't like somebody, then don't go watch them. Don't buy their tickets. Don't turn on the channel or the station that they're on. That's all you have to do. You don't have to go out of your way to dig up some stuff on somebody and try to get them removed or canceled. That person didn't do anything to you. It's your fault that you took offense to what they said or did. Again, that's on you. That's not on them. The one thing that I'm torn on is the aspect of having other people from the cast come out and speak on behalf of Gina Carano's situation. The reason for that, as somebody that's an actor, it's already a tough industry to work in as it is, let alone come out and speak on behalf of one of your friends out there in the public. And in doing so, you might lose your agent, your manager, your career, and you might never get that back. And so I kind of understand the aspect of the behind the scenes of wanting to keep quiet with it all just so you can have a career and have a job. But on the other hand, I do feel for Gina because her emotions really did come across in the interview on the Sunday Special with Ben Shapiro on how there were people behind the scenes that did speak up for her, but it still wasn't good enough for Disney or Lucasfilms. And you see her history of sticking up for other people, and she was very outspoken about that. But at the same time, you do kind of wish that there was somebody that was part of the Mandalorian cast or crew, or some maybe executive producer, or even maybe Dave Filoni or Jon Favreau that could stand up for her, that probably won't feel the repercussions as maybe an actor would because they're so famous. But I'm kind of torn on that idea because, again, I don't want anybody losing their career, and it's sad that Gina's having to go through this, but I'm glad that Bill Burr was at least asked the question and was outspoken about it. That is all the news I have for you today. If you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Please share it with your friends and family, and I'll see you next time on The Bald Brad Show.